Welcome, everyone. My name is Samantha Juster, and I'm Head of Public Engagement at the United States Embassy in Canberra in Ngunnawal country. International Women's Day is a celebration of social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women around the world. But it's also it also marks a call to action for accelerating women's equality. This year, we are excited to celebrate the work of First Nation women creatives and highlight how they use their work to break the bias. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Angelina Hurley. Angelina?
Hi, everyone. I'm Angelina Hurley. I'm speaking to you from Jagera country, from Jagera Yagurrabal country, from the city of Brisbane, which is traditionally known as Mianjin. I am a Gurang, Bira, Gamilaroi, and Mununjali woman from both my grandparents' side, and I've worked in the arts and had quite a few hats over the years, from working in visual arts to theatre, and now doing a PhD at Griffith University, and doing some writing. So I'm very excited to speak to these ladies today. International Women's Day was on Tuesday, March the 8th. To celebrate the achievements of women, and today we're celebrating the achievements of three special First Nations women, Dr. Romaine Morton, Ebony Williams, and Elverina Johnson. Can I all please get you to briefly, quickly introduce yourselves and what nation you're speaking from this morning? Ebony?
Hey,
Ebony,
everyone.
can you hear me? Oh, sorry.
Hey everyone, my name's Ebony Williams. I'm a proud Wiradjuri African-American woman, and I'm coming to you from Darug country in Western Sydney.
Dr. Romaine Morton.
Hi everyone, I'm a Gompo Yagurrabal Minjabul Bunjalung woman from northern New South Wales and Brisbane and Stradbroke Island. I'm currently on Jarraja, the unceded territories of the Djadjawanam people.
Elverina.
Wandera, good morning everybody. I'm here at on Punganji country. I'm Punganji Gurugula woman and Idinji Gimoy woman. So it's lovely to be able to catch up today.
So just before we start, a really quick housekeeping. Everyone will be audience will automatically be put on mute. You can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. And we ask everyone to keep their videos off too, just so it doesn't slow down the webinar process. There will be a Q&A at the end of the session. Also, this session will be recorded with captions and we'll be able to share and go on YouTube later on. So with that, so let's start. How do you girls' career in the arts begin? Who wants to go first? Romaine.
And that's a big question, eh? So I guess mine started as a writer, as writer of poetry specifically. For me, the moment I saw an elder's book of poetry sitting on the kitchen table in Badalla on Yuin country, and I was inspired by the idea that someone from our community had written a book, especially of poetry. And I thought, well, I'd been encouraged throughout high school to write by my teachers at various stages in primary and high school. And just this idea of, I read her book, The Elder's Book, and it occurred to me that I could participate in this kind of storytelling. So that was the moment that I had not just the inspiration, but also the form. And so just through poetry, I still write poetry, but move more into performance poetry. But I really appreciate the craft of poetry and how it works on the premise of visual imagery, sound, but also the economy of language, so the difference to prose. But this kind of economy of language, what I mean by that is being able to capture a moment really quickly and really clearly and communicate it. And my first audiences, of course, are my own mobs. So I'm writing poetry for my own mob. and taking the sensibility then to screenwriting as a filmmaker, you know. So this idea of poetry, clarity, and audience was something that I guess began in that moment when I saw that book of poetry on my mother's kitchen table.
Oh, Rhianna.
Hi, Andy. I think I pretty much started as a young age, and growing up also watching my mum, who's also a creative person, and seeing the stuff that she was doing, you know, in church or at home, but also I guess the starting point for me is being around and growing up around elders, the women elders, you know, who used to sing a lot, and listening to my grandmother sing, because I also sing as well, perform, listening to her sing her hymns and teaching me those hymns, watching them do their dancing as well as their bushcraft. So there was no kind of shortage of inspiration to, I suppose, inspire me and get me started. And when I think back at school, I think teachers noticed what I could do, but I didn't see it myself until I got older. And you kind of think, oh, is that what they saw? You know, because when you're growing up, you sort of really don't pay too much attention to any of your creative abilities or whatever it may be. So yeah, it started a while ago in singing, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I know you as, beginning as a singer. Yeah. Ebony, what about you, sis?
For me, it started at a very, very young age, really, and I think it was being surrounded by music that started me off. It was growing up in the home with a lot of Motown, a lot of Luther Vandross, and a lot of you know, different artists. But I think once I heard a female hip hop artist named MC Lyte, I went, wow, this is something I really want to do. And then Public Enemy and all that stuff that they were talking about, I thought, wow, this is something I could really get into. And during school, I was part of a thing called Hip Opera 95, which was this thing that Urban Theatre Projects, formerly known as Deaf Defying Theatre, had put on. And from that, I was able to write my first lot of music and was able to sort of find my craft and really hone in on becoming a hip hop artist, which is where my arts career started. But then as it went on, I got more and more. Once I left school, I got into the arts heavily and the production side of things and looking at how to actually put things on and what to do. But my music side actually started from really my mum at a very young age, just playing simple Motown music and black music all through my childhood. So yeah, no.
Yeah, because working through in the arts, you have to wear a few hats along your journeys, and so we've done quite a lot of diverse jobs in our experiences, and women have worked across a many number of disciplines, and I've seen your journey in that progress. So can you tell us a little about what that has been for you, and what are those hats you've worn in that journey?
For me, it's been, so, you know, the hip hop artist, it's also been a mentor, it's been doing workshops and stuff, and, you know, working with different people. My journey started out at Bangarra Dance Theatre as a production assistant and in the arts, you know, as a trainee. And I've gotten to work on massive events like the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, to, you know, different big festivals such as Sydney Festival and places like that. That's in the production side of things. Then I've been fortunate enough to work in education, right, and, you know, government in terms of the Australia Council for the Arts, different festival roles, and different things over the years. And currently I'm working with Sydney World Pride and doing their First Nations engagement. So, you know, it's a massive ride. And I think the biggest thing that you need to do is have transferable skills, because that's the only way that you kind of survive and can move into different areas of the arts. And I think, you know, it's about giving anything a go, really. I think that was always my thing, and that's always been the way that I've sort of run my career. More importantly, it's you have to start somewhere. So giving anything a go.
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing, Romaine, I remember seeing you back in the day giving your spoken words and sitting in the audience and some of your poetry readings, and in your journey to now, you know, to film and your beautiful films that you've created now working at AFTRS. How has that journey been for you?
Oh, thanks, Ange. Okay, as you know, it's when you're an Indigenous artist, there's no sureties. You know, it's always, it's such a, it's really, it is that acquiring of skills and your capacity to work in different spaces. But for me, the core principles that I've carried with me, as Elverina was saying, you know, just with that storytelling and being with family and having those storytelling around campfires, around kitchen tables. The backdrop behind me is from my first short film called The Farm. This was, in terms of jobs, this was my first job as a bean picker. Whole communities up and down the east coast of New South Wales, around South Australia and Victoria, were itinerant labourers. So I wanted to do a film that celebrated and acknowledged that labour. You know, just so much in terms of Indigenous labour in this country, the erasure of it, you know, what we've contributed to the infrastructure of this country that still goes unrecognised. That's became the passion of the basis of my stories. I didn't anticipate that, but, you know, South Sea Islander woman, sugarcane cutters, all of that. So how much we actually were, I guess, in this really cheap labour, but we were so fundamental to this country, but also to our families. And that's not a deficit story. So I wanted to tell it as an empowerment story. And the stories we have and those qualities we learnt living, I would never call us poor, because what we have, the skills we have, is that it's not just about how we, you know, live in the past, but these are knowledges that will outlive this system that we're currently living in, for example. So I'm always keep those knowledges alive, because I anticipate that our elders foresee that their endurance of that. So that's the basis of the storytelling, but it also informs my role at AFTRS. So it's the bringing together of all these things into one place. And perhaps my current role as director at the First Nations and Outreach is perhaps the best coming together of all of the things I've learned as an artist, as a community member, as a First Nations woman.
Yeah, because that inspiration works across all mediums, as we know. And like Elverina, I knew you, I saw you performing at the Queensland Museum many years ago, and I've known you as a musician, and now your beautiful artwork is being translated onto fashion and there's great creations. Tell us about that journey, please.
I guess the basis of everything we do as creatives is it stems from the basis of storytelling and how we choose to express those stories, whether it be through poetry, you know, spoken words, music, songwriting, theatre, acting, whatever it is, or visual arts, or any type of performing arts. And I consider myself to be a multidisciplinary artist across different platforms. And I've had the opportunity to be able to share my stories or my grandparents or my mother's stories in various mediums, which is quite challenging at times, because you have to make sure that what you express is okay with them, and the way you say that, tell that story, that it's true to their stories and their life and how they live their life. So how things kind of evolved over the years, from music to to painting, visual arts, and also most recently getting into some acting as well. So I love it. Like I don't think I would want to be in any other space where you can express yourself in different ways and be creative, and also be on a platform where there's like-minded people where in that space, we don't all think we're crazy because we do different things. But, we have one motive, and that's to make sure that our stories are told with the utmost truth and respect. And so developing my craft on the different mediums as hasn't always been easy, but the thing that keeps me grounded is my elders and my community, and you know, and also watching my mom every day in the things that she does. But yes, singing has always been part of my life growing up, and songwriting as well. So, and at the moment, you know, just working on some new music has been something that I've been really, really excited about, because, you know, you grow and you develop in certain ways, and you see things differently from how you saw them, say maybe 10, 20 years ago. And it's always exciting to see how people read and understand your expressions in those different crafts. It's been a good journey, and it's not finished. There's still a lot more to do that I want to achieve.
How do you keep those connections with community and your mob when you're traveling and you're doing different jobs around the place? How do you maintain that connection with, you know, those inspirations of your elders and your family?
Look, always taking the time, making sure that I take that time to sit with elders, take them out, reconnect with them. No matter where I've been around Australia or around the world, I always make sure that they're close with me. I can remember before COVID, when I was in Switzerland, I got a call like so early in the morning, and at, you know, minus 2 degrees, from one of the elders calling me. And I was kind of surprised that she was just, I just wanted to ring and just check in and see how you're going. And I said, thank you so much for calling me, but do you realize it's like 2:30 in the morning over here, and I'm freezing cold, but thank you, and I love you for calling and checking in on me. And so it's things like that that made me feel like no matter where I was in the world, that the elders were connected to me, and always making sure that, you know, their stories were always told no matter where I go. And I love fishing, so I go out a lot fishing with family.
Yeah. Romaine, have you had any of those experiences?
Elverina, I see some of your fishing expeditions on Facebook. It looks amazing. And I'm always jealousing because I'm on Jajawarang country and we're pretty landlocked here. So nearest beach is 2 hours away. So always makes me homesick for that country, for that food too.
You're welcome to come anytime.
Thank you. I'll
Just bring your camera.
All right. And that's exactly it, right? So that's why how I try and stay connected to country. Make stories that have our mob in it and have our way, and, you know, what are the stories that we need to keep alive, you know. So that's why I like to tell stories about my community, and, you know, really, I guess, well, we've got to have these records of them, you know. So for example, with the farm, this film here, so all the extras were actually from community, and they're all the bean pickers. Some of them came for costume department. Some of them rocked up in their own clothes, right? So costume had bean picking costume, and they said, "Oh no, I'll bring my own bean picking clothes," and they rocked up and did their scenes in their clothes. And one uncle there said, "So that's a pretty small bean paddock. How fast do you want me to pick it?" So I said, "No, uncle, we're just pretending to pick it." So this is all pretend now. But hey,
he's a
proper professional. Yeah. That's right, you know, and it's these bringing together of these experiences. And the huts we used to live in, which is a part of this farm, now you remember the fires in 2019 that raged through New South Wales? Well, the huts got burnt down in that fire. And so a whole lot of our childhood memories and this history was gone. The farmers were keeping it there for us as part of this history, because they were involved in this film as well. And now the younger generations have this film to go, and these recordings to actually see the huts as we grew up in them. So that's for me how I like to stay in contact, is like, well, let's tell that story. Let's do a story about fishing. You know, that's one of the feature films I've been carrying around for years now, but it's like Elverina was saying too, those environments have to be right, telling it the right way, making sure everyone's okay with it. So when it's the right time, that film will happen.
Yeah, all those little stories matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ebony.
Yeah, look, I mean, I always stay very connected to family, and I have a very good solid base around me of people that do keep me grounded. I don't think that family is just blood. It goes beyond that sometimes in the way that you create your circle and the way that you're supported with people. And so that is what keeps me in touch with everything. I'm really blessed to be able to work with community and be out there and coordinate stuff and ensure that, their stories are being told in their way and they've got control over that. I think that's one of the biggest things for me, but it is staying connected to networks, and it is those, like Elverine said, like those out of the blue phone calls that you get from somebody that really just bring you down to earth and make it real. And I always appreciate those moments and moments like this as well. But yeah, I think for me, I've got so many different types of groups of people that I hang around and know, but they all have my back in some way and will all reach out when I need it. And it's really weird how that all sort of works out. I lost my mum around 3.5 years ago now, nearly 4. And, since that time, a lot of people have stepped up to really go, you know what, we're going to be there for you. We're going to support you. We're going to have your back. So, that in itself has been a beautiful thing. But I think, staying connected to my family through my cousins and stuff is really, really important to me. And I take that very seriously. But I think it's also more than blood in that, there are other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that play a very big role in my family, and I call them family for that reason, And I think, even in the hip hop stuff that I do, I'm part of a group called Southwest Syndicate, and we've just finished an album and we're now starting to release stuff. And that's a family, it's a big family, but it's a family, and it's another form of family and people around you that will support you no matter what. So, yeah, I really do feel loved and supported. And I think that's probably a big thing in all of us that gives us the ability to continue on.
Yeah. When I travelled one time, a cousin of mine said to me, like, if you're lonely when you're away, just yell in the air and we'll hear you. And so that nearly made me cry, and it connected me straight back home when I was overseas and feeling alone by myself. I might have looked a bit weird doing it in the street, but it was a lovely thing to say and a lovely connection. But our arts community is a family. But what have been some of the, maybe challenges that you've experienced working in the arts?
I think a couple of the biggest challenges are often when you're put into positions that don't have enough support around them. And you're put in to solve a whole lot of problems, and there's not a lot of thought around it, around how you're going to make this person succeed, and then the organisation is not ready to actually work with community. And I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles that I have, and also people not understanding community and the way community works, because we don't work to a white man's schedule. We just don't do it, and it takes time, it takes patience, and it also takes, putting people, in the right positions at the right time that have got that ability to do it and do the work. Because if you're not out there doing the work, then, things will not succeed. And I think that's probably been the biggest challenge in terms of me, but also understanding where I'm coming from in a role to work with community is another thing. I think sometimes, there are the grand gestures that get put there and and the goodwill, but actually working with community takes time.
Yeah. You've definitely, Romaine and Elverine, you've definitely experienced that, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and just picking up on what Ebony's talking about there, one of the big things at the moment with the work that my division's doing, my team's doing, is that centering of community governance. In terms of doing our outreach programs with community, to make sure that how mobs work in this space is at the centre, the co-design of those workshop programs, the identification of what those needs are as identified by the people, what with the problems occur, like Ebony was talking about, when the white man's timeline and production sensibilities become central, then that's forcing something to happen that is not yet ready to happen. So, but that's been something, communicating that to others who are participating in those programs is the challenge. So everyone's on the same board. This is what community governance means, for example. This is what the protocols mean. You know, it's these self-determinations and acts of sovereignty that our communities have to have at the centre of their creativity, to ensure that those, you know, our responsibilities and accountabilities are prioritised over a finance agenda, for example. So that's, you know, Ebony, you hit it on the nail on the head. That's just my daily work life. Is what you just talked about.
Rhianna, what are been some of the any challenging experiences for you?
Yeah, look, I guess same with Ebony and Maine, that, you know, drawing the line between the cultural governance that happens within tribal, you know, community sectors, because too often we get caught up in the white ideas of colonized ideas of what governance is, and then some of that kind of just wipes out or it overtakes cultural and community governance. And that's when it can become difficult in terms of managing certain projects or whatever, because as you say, the sensibility or the sensible thing to do for people to understand is to do it this way. This is, you know, this is how it should be done, when in actual fact, sometimes it's got to be done how it's always done, to get through those processes. And oftentimes we have, you know, we will have people come to the community, they've made these appointments, they've paid for their flights, they've done everything, and there's a funeral that happened because someone passed away within that time frame, and everything has to stop because cultural governance overtakes all the other stuff, and those are things that you sort of can't do anything about at the time, but you have to follow those protocols, because you have not the people that you've made appointments with to face, but you have your community and your family and your elders to face, and that outweighs any other disciplinary action that you might get in another space. So I guess in terms of, you know, the difficulty, it's also around getting people to understand who are external to our communities, how the dynamics work quite differently within our communities and our families. So that can always be a bit of a stumbling block, I guess. Yeah. And in terms of, you know, personal support is always something that we need. And I draw on support from close family and friends and other people within my industry, because I know that people within this industry, as you sisters, we get it. We understand what it's like to be in an industry that a lot of people don't understand, because we go from contract to contract, project to project, across different sectors and mediums. And to other people that might seem like, gee, these people are unstable, but we're not. It's the industry that we work in, and that's what we get paid to do, to cross sector. Yeah,
support for the arts is always very difficult outside our immediate networks, and the last couple of years for sure with COVID has been very hard on our artists. Can you name what's a memorable or rewarding experience for you today? One of your most enjoyable experiences?
I'm assuming because we're silent that there's so many that we're having a hard time
finding which one it is. Yeah, there's a lot, I'm sure. Like, I know my favourite from each of you, what they are, but, you know, I'd like you to speak to them.
Well, mine is more of a private one so far. So I worked on a film with my partner, Dr. Lou Bennett, we were recording a film for her song called Jaran Yilamum, which is a song about the experience of Jarra baby. This is down here on Jajawaran country. It's in the public domain, so I'm not saying anything that's not already known. We went and filmed this particular film on a place called Lianganuk, which is Mount Alexander, which is about half an hour from where we live. And just back to that idea of, it was in partnership with ACME. So the idea that, you know, we had a timeline and a budget. Well, you know, the mountain had other ideas. So we had this concept of what the film would be. But it turned out the mountain, you know, Lianganuk required us there for a year instead of a few months. So we ended up getting to know Lianganuk really well on a lovely spiritual level. You know, we went through the seasons of Lianganuk, visited every other month regularly. And it's now become that place where we go to when we want to feel empowered. And for me, living away from the East Coast and from my countries, finding a place and forming that relationship with this country, especially my partner's country, and being married into this country, learning how to listen well enough to have that kind of relationship is something that is still really important to me. And learning how to love a country when, and first, like I said, a long way from the coast, from the fishing. So that was a big deal for me. But now this country has become such an amazing teacher. You know, it's taught me a lot of things. One of them being is listening and patience and gratitude. The birds here are amazing. So we have a family of magpies who live in the backyard, all those kind of things, you know. So for me, that's the experience I will speak to the most. It's a creative, intellectual, spiritual experience, but it's also very something that I can talk about, but it's not something that, well, you'll have to wait and see the film, because we're going to install it at ACME and you might get to see it.
Give it away, I can't wait, yes. Ebony, were you going to say something?
Gosh, there's a lot of things I've achieved when I look back.
I was about to say, there's so many from being on the front cover of the Rolling Stone, and I know I always refer to that, but like, you know, if I was on the front cover of the Rolling Stone, that would be my wallpaper.
Yeah, look, I guess there's that. I mean, there's like, you know, being one of the first female MC or third, well, Aboriginal third, MCs in the country as well. To being, you know, signed to an all-female hip-hop label, and then being able to do, you know, some amazing support acts, and also doing Remains poetry as well back in the day. You know, it was absolutely amazing. But I think things like, you know, I guess the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games was a big one, because, you know, I was responsible for, you know, bringing a lot of people down to Sydney and looking after them for 2 weeks in the lead up to that opening. But being in the stadium on the night and seeing it all come together is probably one of the biggest moments. But I think it's also just personal growth and being able to look back, like a little bit like what Romaine was talking about, and being able to back yourself and trust your gut, because that does come from, you know, having a lot of you know, having projects that don't go so well, but also having projects that do go really, really well. But being able to now sit in a position where I'm, you know, part of a festival that's going to happen in 2023, and it's like, this is Sydney World Pride, and we're bringing World Pride to Australia and the Asia Pacific for the first time. And I think it's a massive achievement in my eyes to be able to, you know, hold the job that I do, but, you know, work with an incredible team of people as well. You know, I work with another a man, you know, Ben Gratz, who is miscellaneous in drag, and you know, and it's amazing because me and Ben's journey actually started on the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, working together. So now we've gone full circle and we're working on this amazing opportunity. But I think for me, it's about the elevation of voices that I've been able to, you know, to play a role in as well, and mentor along the way. I now know that there's people working in doing workshops, and I know that there's young people that have now turned into adults and they're now running their own businesses. And, you know, that sort of stuff is the stuff that keeps me going. You know, when you see them actually achieving and being little hip hop stars, or, you know, running their own little programs now, or going into youth centres and stuff like that. Like, that's the stuff I live and breathe for.
Elverina.
There's so many highlights.
I'm so excited to see your work walking up and down the catwalk. It's so beautiful, honestly.
Thank you. There's so many highlights that I've had over the years, and just sort of going on the story from Romain about some of the stuff that happened there. One of the highlights that I always speak about is when I was working for Queensland Performing Arts, and we did the story of the Yarrabah brass bands, and we were doing a small doco, and we had to go to some of the communities to meet some of the surviving members of some of the other bands, Yarrabah brass band and other bands. So one particular trip, we and there was a non-Indigenous person with us who was, you know, producing that particular project. And so we had to go to Kuranda and see if we could find, because I tried to contact community members to find one of the female members of the Mauna Mauna Mission Brass Band. So we could not contact anyone who knew her or was able to get in touch with her. So we decided to actually go to Kuranda and find her. So anyway, so she could be part of the doco and tell her story. So anyway, we come to this little corner store, pulled up. I said, look, I want to go and grab something from the little shop while we look around for this lady. So I went there, and there's this old lady sitting at the front of the store with a bag of groceries. And I said, hello, how are you? I didn't know who she was. I said, we're here doing some filming. Would you happen to know a lady by the name of Velma Green? She said, I'm Velma Green, and I need a lift to Mauna Mauna. And so when that happened, it was like, and there were several incidents that happened like that. And it was kind of like the realization that if a story needs to be told, it can be told. And that the old people will be behind you. They will make things happen. Things will happen that you just cannot explain. And so we were able to give her a lift to Mauna Mauna, do our filming with her about her part in the Mauna Mauna Brass Band. And she played the euphonium, but it turned out she was also a musician that she was like in her 70s at the time we met her, but she played the bass guitar. She played other instruments as well. And just listening to her story about how when she was in the band, they didn't get to see the outside. You had to be in the band to actually get out of Mauna Mauna or other communities. So she said, when we went, I had never seen the ocean before. And she said, I looked up, this is how she said it. She said, I looked over and I saw the big wide ocean, and I looked over the mountains. She said, I didn't see, I thought it was a big field of brass. And so that moment, I just sat there and I sobbed and I cried during that whole interview, because I kind of felt what she would have felt back then, in a sense, that not just the pain and suffering of not being able to get out of community, but also the joy of being able to do it as well. So that the mixed emotions. And so there was several highlights like that where things happened that we knew was going to be impossible to do, but it happened. And that was one. So the other one was getting to present at the United Nations. That was a pivotal moment for me. A lot of things, but right now, currently, one of the big highlights is having my collection and in partnership with Taking Shape, who's a major clothing store that looks after caters for plus size women. And I like who they are and what they represent and the valuing of women, you know, plus size ladies, and making women feel loved and valued and beautiful no matter what size or background you come from, that you deserve to look beautiful and feel beautiful as just as much as a size 8 or 10 woman. So I love being part of that, and working with this company has been such a highlight that it's, you know, it's been good. And now the collection will be at Australia Fashion Week next in May for First Nations fashion, but also be in the shops because the launch will take place before that next month. And I've listed some of those shops on my Facebook page. And another highlight is doing playing a character in a web series called Homespun, which has been really good, and I'm looking forward for that to happen when we did the filming in Cogen up in WA. And shout out to Beck Bignell, the producer of that show, and it was really good being able to play that character and bringing that character to life. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's some of my highlights. There's so much more, but these kind of top it at the moment.
We're going to soon ask the audience if they have any questions. Please raise your hand or put them in the chat and we'll come to you. But the last question before we sort of take any external questions is like, how do you think the arts has contributed to the visibility of First Nations women and their voices? Or to you as in First Nations artist, as a female artist?
Sorry, can you repeat that again, Angie?
It's about how the arts has contributed to our voice as First Nations women and First Nations specifically artists and creatives.
Well, I'll go first. I think the arts has been a major stepping stone for giving us as women a voice and making our voices louder, because it is a space where you do have the freedom to, and you know, in most places, the creative freedom and licensing to be able to share your story without interruption. And that's what I like about this space, is that it's all part of storytelling, and your storytelling in whatever medium or platform you use can be as loud as possible. And people just have to kind of sit back and listen or read or, you know, go to the gallery and look at it, whatever it is. But it's there, and it's a good space to work in.
Ebony.
I think it's...
oh, sorry. Go on.
I think it's a lot more... we're getting a lot more opportunities now to kind of tell our stories, I guess, and tell them the way that we want to tell them. I think that's probably one thing that I've kind of seen over the years. And I think, you know, even when you're coming into music and stuff like that, you're actually now seeing a lot more female artists up there. And particularly, you know, there are a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists now that are starting to sort of move into the thing. And I think that's because, you know, you're able to get music up quite quickly. But also I'm seeing a lot more of film. You're seeing a lot more of the stories that actually need to be told. So yeah, I think it's a little bit more progressive. I think, you know, there's still a long way to go in terms of as anything really, I feel. But I think now that we are starting to get, you know, our voices a lot more elevated, and it's a lot easier to sort of get into things. The opportunities come a little bit more now than they did, you know, when I first sort of started out. Yeah, I guess that's really my take on it.
Romain?
And it's interesting. I mean, you and I have had a lot of these yarns, eh?
Yes.
So
I mean,
for me, this
can be perceived as a very male-dominated space. So, you know, what does that mean for First Nations women?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's the the matriarchs of my family, right? So their voices, their strong storytelling voices and identity is really what informs my practice and my storytelling. For me as a poet, it's been the community, you know, with Koori Radio, having my poetry broadcast with Koori Radio, for example, published through Koori Mail. So it's always been the community that said, keep writing. So that's, I knew who my audience was. It's interesting though with, how do we protect the integrity of those voices really becomes a key thing for me. So because we're working in an industry that it's very gender dominant, male. But what are the platforms and the production principles? You know, how do they support us? And I've found that that's the part we've had to fight for, our rights within this space to tell Aboriginal women's stories, you know, so that means taking on all of those industrial media production models, whether it's film, whether it's writing, whether it's music, you know. So, and I thought when you asked that question about a key moment in my life, or what I didn't talk about is the time I toured in support of Sweet Honey in the Rock. And being in the presence of these women, half of them were doctors. And for me, when I saw them perform with Titters back in 1992, that was when I realized, oh, I can become a PhD. So, you know, as a practice-based researcher, my practice, I've always been interrogating what it is and what do we require. So I guess a bigger project for me is how do we tell our stories and make these spaces culturally safe for Aboriginal women, Indigenous women, really, because that's still the fight we're on. But I think the spaces we've fought for, more than that they've been given. We actually continue to fight for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that over the years. We've seen that. I've seen it definitely with your journeys. We're like, I think we're nearly 10 minutes away from the end of the session. So if anyone wants to jump on and ask a question, Elverina, we have one person who'd like a bit more information about the label that your fashion's on. Can you expand a little bit? Yeah.
Yes. So taking shape.
Trish Simmons. Thanks, Trish, for your question.
Yeah. Hi, Trish. So the label is with Taking Shape clothing store. So they have quite a few number of stores around Australia. So my collection will be in about 20 of those stores, and the label will be Elverina Johnson with Taking Shape. So, and they will be limited editions, so you need to get them quick. Yeah, Taking Shape stores, they have their own boutiques as well as in the Maya stores and in a lot of the major cities.
We have a question. Yeah, apologies, Trish. I was going to get you to unmute and ask the question yourself, but we'll do that now. Sorry about that. Rhianna, she has a question about from a film student's point of view. Can you unmute yourself and would you like to ask your question to the panel? Thank you. Can we unmute Rhianna?
Hello?
Yes. Hi, Rhianna.
Hi. Hi, I'm so sorry. It's actually Miriam. I don't know how that's happened, but my name's Miriam.
Hi, Miriam.
Hi. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm a current film student and, you know, I do kind of feel I do struggle a little bit in terms of feeling culturally safe to be able to tell my stories in the university environment. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were in terms of what universities can do to better provide a culturally safe environment for us to you know, be vulnerable and tell these kind of stories that, you know, heavily involve our transgenerational trauma.
Thanks, Rhianna. Ange, I'll jump in and speak to this question. It's part of my remit as a director at AFTRS. This is in terms of embedding First Nations values within the school, but also creating those culturally safe environments. It's part of course, the ongoing project, but some of the bigger things that we've been doing is looking at governance. So this is where it's going to be a bit challenging, right? Because these are universities and these institutions. But protocols, of course, are important in terms of how we implement First Nations protocols, such as pathways and protocols, Terry Janke's work, into the classroom, so that they're not just, they move more from a theory into a practice. So, but of course, this is about a commitment from the actual university to do this. The challenge I find with the structures of our stories, as Rhianna was talking about in terms of the trauma, unfortunately, one of the challenges of decolonising the narrative form is that colonialism has a great appetite for Indigenous trauma. And that Indigenous trauma can be positioned as the fundamental elements of drama. So when we're talking about how we unpack the trauma, but also how we decolonize the idea of drama. What is our drama? What are the stories we want to tell without being put into the deficit and without having to present our trauma as the key narrative thrust of any film? So those are the challenges, as well as there's a word I learned just yesterday in racial discrimination, the Day Against Racial Discrimination, which is race battle fatigue. You know, this idea when we are always having to present our experience as racialized peoples, the trauma of that experience. So these learning environments also have to be trauma informed, and the onus ultimately has to be from us to do that labor, and of course shift it to the institution itself to do that labor. Spin the camera around and let's interrogate whiteness will be I think the fundamental practice to begin to decolonize all of these spaces.
Thank you. Mary, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? It's about opportunities or gaps. Thanks, Mary.
Hey, I had to think for a second on how to unmute myself. My name's Mary. I am with Music Viva Australia. And I was interested to hear any of the panelists' take on what, you have spoken already a little bit about this, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the gaps in opportunity that you feel still exist for young First Nation artists, or indeed in terms of encouraging First Nations children to consider the arts and consider their own artistic practice. Do you know, yeah, that's my line of inquiry.
Ebony, you've worked with a lot of youth.
Look, I think, you know, when you're starting out, it's quite daunting, because it's like, where do you go to get yourself funded? How do you get yourself out there? And I think right now we're in a time when, you know, technology plays the massivest part in trying to get any kind of, you know, exposure opportunities and stuff like that. But I think it is about, you know, you have to go away and really hone your craft and understand that even getting funding is a very, very, very competitive thing. So to stand out, you do have to have a point of difference. You do have to be able to back yourself, and you do have to understand that sometimes it's not going to happen straight away either. You know, my career is still very much ongoing. You know, I've, you know, been able to land some incredible opportunities, but I think also it is about ensuring that you know what you want and how you want to get it, and having that gameplay there. And I think it's about also empowering yourself. So looking at funding, looking how it's being spread, looking and really getting in there, asking questions. You know, if I didn't ask questions, I would be nowhere where I am today without that sort of stuff. So you really do have to be savvy with it, and just remember that all questions are relevant. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit outside the sphere, but, you know, the shame job factor has to, you know, go away in order for you to understand how to take it on. And I think everybody on this call, you know, has gone through and stumbled at times, but, you know, because of passion and because of knowing what you want to do ultimately, that's where you get to. I don't know if that kind of answers the question, but I think it is about exploring all of the things that you can explore and learning as much as you can.
I wish we had more time. Given that we have a few minutes left and we're speaking to quite a few students online as well in this session, what advice would you give young people or First Nation students? Why would you advise a career in the arts? What advice can you give them if they want to pursue?
I think for me personally, just be yourself. I know that sounds cliche, but you know, for myself, I had to kind of draw the line in terms of what do I want to bring into this space and how do I want to represent myself, my people, and my stories? Do I want to constantly be coming into the space as, First Nations woman that's always had all this, that's gone through so much stuff with our history and all of that? Or do I want to now start projecting in the space the celebration of who I am as a successful woman, a successful First Nations woman? Because I think that, as Dr. Romain said, that sometimes we're expected to bring along all of that drama and all that drama stories with us. Yes, those things are evident in our past and people are still dealing with it. But at some point you have to be able to say, enough is enough. I want to move past this personally, and I want to start telling positive stories and start projecting that we can be successful Black women, we can have our voices heard, and we can be in this positive space and project that out. Otherwise, we take the next generation and we breed all of that stuff in them. We've got to be able to draw the line somewhere and say, nah, let's just be, we can be successful. Sometimes take away even the word Black. We're people, we're women. We can be successful. And I've often said to my son who's just become a lawyer, sometimes we don't have to say we're a Black lawyer or a Black doctor or whatever. We're just a doctor or a lawyer or an artist or whatever, because we make the mistake of categorizing ourselves sometimes, and that puts our own limits on us. For me, that's like, stop now. Just succeed and do your best with who you are as a creative woman, as a successful woman.
We have 1 minute left, but a sister has raised her hand. I'm sorry. This is Rita, Sister Rita. Are you still there? Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I was just wondering what you deadly ladies would say to white fella organizations who are scared and reluctant to work with our people in the industry.
Probably.
Sorry, Eb. I'd say what I say to them every day is that racism is an outdated technology. And really what we're looking for is, what are the sustainable models? There's enough of a global consensus that we need to be able to create stories and knowledges in culturally safe environments. And this ultimately will have economic viability, because these are the basics that we need to live on this planet. Racism is an outdated technology, and it's a great cost to business. So if you're going to appeal to the business sensibilities, that's what I'd be saying.
Thank you, Romain. I'm sorry we've run out of time, people. I mean, I could speak to these amazing women forever, and we could have great conversations. I'm sorry, there was a couple of questions I couldn't get to, and I couldn't, apologies to Trish, I couldn't expand on some of the things that they were saying as well, because I didn't want to impose on their time. But thank you for everyone for logging in today and joining us. Thank you to my panelists. I really appreciate it. And yeah, that's the end of our session. Thank you, everyone. That's the end of our session.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone who logged on.
Thank you.
Big love.